All right, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Dr. Vibe. I am the host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, and I'm not the star today. I'm just steering the ship. We have a great international conversation that's going to be driving the ship. Just a little bit about me. I am a member of an organization called Dad Central, and with that collaboration we have with Dove Men Care. Last year, we were able to reach out directly and indirectly to over 100,000 fathers around the world. So looking forward to a great conversation today. And most important, we have to hail up Voice of Men 360, who is making this event happen today. Big thanks to what they are doing and going to be doing in order to help not only men, boys, and families all around the world. We're hosting our international conversation today. The title of the conversation is A Healthy Generation, Creating Safe Schools. And it's a distinguished panel discussion. So I want to make sure you know that it's a distinguished international panel. What we're going to be doing is introducing our friends, our panelists, one by one, and then we're going to get right into the conversation. Just some general housekeeping rules. If you are watching this, please type in your questions in the comments section wherever you're watching this, and we will get you the questions as best as we can in the time that we have allotted. So with that little preamble, looking forward to an epic conversation today. In tradition that I like to do, I like to introduce ladies first. And we have one lady on the panel, and she is a great lady. And I just want to give a little background about her before we get to the guys. So Christy White is a Bear Clan from the Oneida Nation of the Thames. She's a mother of 4. She has spent many years helping to establish and implement programs for families and children based around healthy living, healthy relationships, and literacy. She is a children's author and advocate for cultural and language appropriate content for Indigenous children, as well as a theme and content relatable for boys. She and her family are very active in their communities and attend many events and ceremonies. So good morning or good day, Christy, because people could be watching this from all around the world. Good day, Christy. How are you doing?
Good day, Dr. Vibe. I am doing great and just so happy to be here. And actually, something I didn't get to add to my bio is now new Canadian Indigenous publisher.
Fantastic. Congratulations. That's a great win. Thank you for sharing that. Looking forward to your contributions today. Next up, we have Willie A. Price. And Mr. Price is a motivational speaker, self-published author of more than 16 publications, ranging from Black history to self-awareness to real estate and property management. He has a BA in mental health from the University of Buffalo. We won't talk about their Buffalo Bills. That's another conversation. He became a member of the National Speakers Association in 2017 in January. He's a motivational speaker and creator of several youth and adult workshops, from The Power of You to Shining Star and No Dream is Impossible and What's Your Next Move programs. The Think and Grow Wealth program is also emphasizes the importance of building self-esteem and financial literacy as participants create their roadmaps to a successful life. Good day, Mr. Price. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Good, good. How's the day treating you so far?
So far, so good. So
okay.
And forward to this.
Well, just want to tell people, Mr. Price, how long have you been awake today?
I've been up since 3 a.m. waiting. Patiently waiting. Looking forward to this.
All right. So I just want to see, he's excited. So the participants, everyone should be excited. So Mr. Price, looking forward to your great contributions during our conversation today. Avram Weiss is a clinical psychologist who sees individuals and couples for psychotherapy online and in his office in Maine. Mr. Weiss is recognized nationally for his pioneering work on the process of change in individuals and organizations. He's told me to call him Avram, so I'm going to say, Avram, good day, and how are you today? Got to take yourself off mute.
Good morning. I'm good, and I'm excited about the chance to learn from all of you today.
I love it. Fantastic. Next up, Oliver D. Levy is the creator of the Mindful Parenting Toolkit. The objective of the Mindful Parenting Toolkit is to shift parents' minds and empower them to inspire their loved ones to impact the world and live their dreams. Mr. Levy, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, guys. Thank you for having me here. If you guys hear any noise in the background, Saturday is the cleaning day for my kids. So, and they usually have fun organizing and cleaning. So that might be happening when I'm talking. So be aware. But thank you, Dr. Vi, for having me here. I'm looking forward.
My pleasure. Absolutely fantastic. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Dave Rogers. And let me just pull up Dave's information as my computer is behaving here. There we go. Yes, he's a global mentor, international speaker, author of Get 2020 Vision, past president of the Asia Professional Speakers. He's an investor, social entrepreneur, and mental health advocate. Welcome, Mr. Rogers. How are you today?
Never better, Dr. Vibe, and great to be here. And thank you so much to all of the wonderful participants investing their time in something that is very, very important to talk about.
Excellent. We've got the introductions out of the way, so let's get it. So would like to get a little comment from everyone before we really get into the conversation. You know what? We should, well, he's gone. Sit around. I thought he was going to be here, but no problem. We'll get some opening comments. When this subject was presented to you, what were your first thoughts, and what are your thoughts, just overview, before we get right into the questions? Who'd like to lead off? I'll ask if you don't put up your hand.
I'll say
There we go.
I'll say that it's terribly sad to me that we have to have this conversation, that we can't protect our children.
Okay. I'll still ask if you don't put up your hand or unmute yourself.
I'll actually go next. I'll actually go next. When I saw the question, I thought it was great. I was glad he invited me to be a part, because I had actually asked to be a part of the authors group. But when he brought this up, it was perfect for me, because I work in the schools. I created a program called From Boys to Men. And that is part of the problem, is because young men are having such a difficult time in school, not only with, violence and things like that, but just with their learning. And I found that, through my studies, and I'll talk about what I do later, but one of the things I found is that by the time kids get to third and fourth grade, they fall behind, especially boys. They start to fall behind in their literacy behind girls. They don't read as well. They don't write as well. Girls are reading and writing, things like that. Boys are playing with toys, and, boys are just doing different things. And what I found is that because of that, they start to fall behind in class. And that's when you start to see the behavior changes at that third and fourth grade level, when they start to fall behind, because now they're find themselves being embarrassed in the classroom when the teacher asks for someone to come up and read, or to write something, or to talk about something. They're embarrassed because they know they're lacking. So I'm going to talk about what we do in the program and what we do in the schools with the young men that we work with.
Excellent. Who's up next? 2 down. We got a few more to go.
Yeah, for me, I was like, yes, I was actually very excited, because studying this parenting thing and studying the psychological aspect of kids, and understanding the mental health triggers and all these things, I was very excited, because certain question that you guys are going to hear me talk about today, are certain topics or certain insights I might be talking about, is not being talked about too often. And we have to normalize things. And, when I said yes, I was excited, I'm talking about, to talk about this from a more parenting side of things, because we all know that everything starts from home, right? Obviously, there's, the school, and there's certain system, and teachers and counselors, they play a very important role as well. But if we can really put a finger on, some of the insights that I'll be sharing, then, I was very excited for this conversation. So when I saw that topic, I was like, yes, finally, I can get to be part of it.
Excellent. Who's up next?
I'll go.
Sure.
Super excited because of it. A topic right up my alley, because I write Indigenous children's books, specifically geared towards boys and literacy. And I'm so excited about the conversation, especially when you take an Indigenous spin. We're talking about residential school system and how that trickled down, and how we really I'm just excited to talk about how parents and school systems as a whole can really, really look at making change that's more positive for our boys in the school system.
Excellent. We have one more panelist that hasn't said anything yet. I know who you are.
Eradicate violence against men and boys. My first reaction was curiosity. And I'm extremely curious about what I'll hear today and what it will trigger in me as I reflect. In preparation, I reached out to friends who are principals at schools here in Ontario, people who run schools in Malaysia. And I prayed that some of the messages that we'll share today will make a positive impact. And lo and behold, emails came in, and I look forward to sharing and connecting today in a way that we might be of service that can make a difference.
That's good stuff. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. That is beautiful. And I know that everyone who is a panelist today is very passionate. So I'm speaking audience, whether you're watching live on replay, you're going to get good stuff today. You're going to get some real good stuff. Let's start with our first conversation piece today. What are your thoughts about the current situation when it comes to school and safeties? And I know a lot of it is online now, but if you can, before we went a lot online, and I know we're some of us back, think about it not only from an online perspective, but a face-to-face perspective. What are your thoughts when it comes to school and safety these days? Don't be shy. Unmute and just go for it.
I'll follow up on what I said a moment ago, which is by telling you a dream I had a long time ago, which was very impactful for me. I dreamt that aliens, intelligent life, came to Earth, and for some reason they wanted to talk to me, and they wanted to ask me how things are going on the planet. And in my dream, the first answer that came to my mind was brief. All I said to them with tears in my eyes was, "We're killing our own children."
Why the killing our own children came up in that dream?
Because I think that's if I were to say the saddest, most problematic thing that's going on in our world, if you can't protect your children, where else would you start? If you can't provide a secure, safe environment for your children, what else can we do?
Okay.
How can we tolerate failing at that?
Good points. Who'd like to add on?
I like to add to that. What was the question again, so I can really tie it up?
Just basically, what are your thoughts about the current environment when it comes to schools and safety for the kids?
Yes. So Avram, right? Based on what Avram was saying, there's too much pressure being put on the school system and counselors and teachers and all these things. And because of that, we are not even creating a safe space for our kids to even share. And because of that, we're not really connected to our kids so they feel comfortable sharing, because we can't see what's outside their home. And, you can detect a lot of different things based on conversation, based on how connected you are with your child. So that's a great way to start based on what Avram just said in terms of, creating a safe space. And then that's where everything starts. And, for me, it's just too much pressure being put on just on the outside world, right? And, whether it's leaders in the community, teachers, counselors, coaches, they're just there to kind of partnership with you as the parent.
Okay. Anyone else?
I agree. Well, I partially what Oliver said, I kind of agree with. Well, I don't disagree with anything he said, but what he said in the beginning about the schools, we're putting a lot on the schools. That's where I do agree very, very heavily with, because if you think about it, when a teacher went to school to become a teacher, she wasn't told that she's going to, or he wasn't told, you're going to be a counselor, you're going to be a babysitter, you're going to have to look for, abuse. You're going to have to watch for kids coming to school with guns. You're going to have to watch for all these things other than teaching. And so what you have now, you're making the schools, you have to, I mean, the schools are almost like you have to create like a fortress, not for just what's outside, but what you're bringing into the school. So a lot of times, a school's not prepared for that because that was never what schools were intended for. So, people say, the schools are bad and they need to do more, but you can't do more. That's not what schools were created for, to fend off, the thought of every day wondering if a kid's going to come in and shoot up the building, if a kid's going to come in there with a knife, a kid's going to come in and he hasn't had breakfast or food for the last 2 or 3 days, or he's coming in and his clothes, because he has the same clothing on because he don't have clothes at home. And so now these are things that teachers, that's why you don't have a lot of people going into the teaching field anymore, because there's so many things a teacher has to deal with. They're going home to their families stressed out. So when you mentioned that, about the schools, the way you mentioned it, it just made me think about, we're putting a lot of pressure on the schools. And you even have parents who, they don't even work with the kids at home. They send them to school. The school is going to teach them. When they come home with the homework and the kids fail and the parents are ready to go to graduation, why isn't my kid graduating? Because you never did one thing at home with them to make sure that he would graduate, because you put it all on the school and on the teacher, who's got to feed him, got to clothe him, got to keep the other kids from teasing him because he stinks. All these things a teacher has to deal with. And that's just the teacher. Then you got the administrators who's got to try to console these teachers. So, I mean, it's I could go on and on about that, but I won't. I'll let somebody else talk.
Can I respond briefly to that?
Avram, please do.
Willie, I really love what you said, and you gave me a thought, which is we put way more energy and money into keeping ideas out of our school than violence.
Yes.
I'm not really worried about my kid being hurt by ideas.
I'm just going to throw in something really, really quick here to the conversation here. My father was a teacher in the same public school, basically in the same classroom, for 38 years.
Wow.
And the reason why he retired, he said, my job was not to be a parent. My job was to be an educator. So what is being echoed in this conversation, this is many years ago, this is like he retired 15, 20 years ago. And he said that. So look where we're at now compared to even 15, 20 years ago.
Exactly.
So, and I know it isn't part of our conversation piece, but I've got an upcoming question based on what's being talked about here. But I know there's some other comments that other panelists want to share right now. So Christy, go ahead, please.
Just to jump in on that sort of little commentary there. One thing I do agree on multiple levels that absolutely parents need to put more time and investment in, but on the same hand, especially for Indigenous children, one thing you kept bringing up is about stinking clothes and not being able to have adequate showers and that kind of thing. And unfortunately, when it comes to the education system, one thing we have to look at for Indigenous children is they don't have the opportunity to have clean water, to have clothing, or food. So when they do go to school, exactly what you're talking about becomes a bullying issue all the way around, because you're right, the teacher's frustrated because they may not understand that perspective of an Indigenous child coming into an urban center going to school. And then on the same hand, other children just use it as a bullying factor, which then becomes this just big cycle of things when you come from a community where necessities isn't always something that you're privileged to have.
Great, good stuff. Dave, would you like to add anything to the conversation at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Excellent, excellent. So my question from what I've heard so far is, whose fault is it for the environment that you've just talked about?
Everybody's.
Okay.
That's a hard question for a therapist.
Yeah,
We're not big enough.
When you say fault,
Well, let me put it this way. Who's responsible for this situation that, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying is not good? Who's responsible for what we have right now, what's in our lap right now when it comes to this subject?
I think everyone's responsible. Everyone has a role. Everyone has a part in it. You know, the parents, the teachers, administrators, the counselors, everyone has a role. But what we find is that a lot of those roles aren't being fulfilled by who's supposed to fulfill them, and it's being put on the teachers. So like you said, your dad said, you know, I wasn't, I'm quitting because I'm not a parent. But that's what the teacher becomes, because that teacher, that kid comes who's having those issues at home because he's not getting fulfilled at home, whatever needs, comes into the classroom, and the teacher, if she's a caring teacher, she'll see those things. She'll see the lacking, you know, he's hungry. His clothes, he had the same clothes on the last 3 or 4 days. He's sitting in the back of the classroom sleeping because he's been up all night, maybe babysitting his little brother or sister. You know, all these things that this kid is bringing from the home, the teacher has to fulfill it. So there should be a role for everyone. That's how schools are supposed to be. School is supposed to be for, like you said, for learning, like Avram, right? Like Avram said, schools are supposed to be for learning. You know, you're supposed to go in there and you're learning and getting information so that way you can create a better life for yourself. But a lot of these kids are coming in and they're in so much turmoil and so much, you know, so many things going on. You got kids raising kids at home. They're going home and taking care of little brothers and sisters, and, you know, maybe even taking care of the mom and the dad, you know, depending on what the situation is there. So there should be roles for everyone, but the roles aren't being fulfilled. So it's just, you know, there's a lot of things going on right now.
Okay.
Who's
Anyone?
responsible? When I first thought about that, I was like, parents. But when I really thought about it, we always say it takes a village, right? What does that really mean? Like, this is just a buzzword, and we use it everywhere, not only with, you know, kids, but we use it everywhere. What does that really mean? It means, just like Willie said, everyone has a role to play in the child's life. I was born and raised on a farm, a real village, like real village. And you know, maybe that's where my passion came from. But you know, when I see, you know, bartering system, and my uncle, or everyone in my neighborhood I call uncle or aunt, and they'll always have a way to guide me somehow, or give me some encouragement, or if they can't get through me because I'm so young and stubborn, they'll make sure they partner up with my parents. So when I use the word partnering, schools should be partnering, and coaches should be partnering in sports teams. Wherever we are, it should be a partnership. But you know, parents have to really make that mind shift to say, yes, it's a partnership. So you know, everyone has a role to play in that child's life. So this is how a village is created: resources and, you know, a partnership kind of relationship when it comes to who's responsible.
Well, thank you for changing the question from blame to responsible. That helps. And I said that therapists aren't big on questions with blame, but we are big on paradoxes. So I'm going to give you 2 completely contradictory answers,
Okay.
if I may.
Sure do.
So one is, I worked in the prison system for a long time. And part of my job was doing men's prison, and part of my job was doing intake. So I'm asking them about their history. And almost every single man I talked to in prison, by the time you got to middle school in their history, you understood exactly why the story ended in prison talking to you. I once ran a group with 5 guys in it, and 3 of the 5 guys had been assaulted by deadly weapons by their fathers in a group of 5 guys. Obviously, that's not representative, but it tells you something about what. So that's one version of the answer. Another kind of contradictory version, but it sort of goes to what you guys are saying about everyone. I want to recommend a book called, I think it's called Boys to Boys. I think it's called Boys to Boys. Judy Chu, CHU is the author. She did a multiple year study of a group of kids in a Quaker school, pre-K to first grade. And she stayed every day and she talked to these kids and really got to know them. That is a Quaker school. These are nonviolent people. Their parents are liberal, nonviolent people. And what do you think these boys' favorite thing to play with that they did every chance they could when the teacher's back was turned, guns. And so what I learned from that book is all of these parents were doing everything they could to be as liberal and nonviolent as they possibly could. And when their backs were turned, because the kids were watching everything in the culture about violence. And so, yes, parents are responsible, but even well-meaning parents, it's not enough.
Good take. Good take. Anyone want to add? Okay, no problems. Just some comments from some people who are watching here. We got Digla saying schools have become a one-stop shop. We have to be everything to everybody, and we are lacking manpower and way underpaid. And Tammy is saying here, I agree, it starts at home with the parents, although some homes are not able to help themselves. It's good that schools are trying. They just need help in implementing. Really good points. Anyone on the panel want to add on to the comments that I just shared from some of the people watching? I see you're not. Go ahead.
Sorry, one thing I wanted to add, just as we remember, a lot of times when as parents you're getting stuff, letters home from the school and things like that, I think one thing all of us have forgotten is that our children are supposed to be part of school communities. And I think we've forgotten what it is as a community to stand behind children and uplift children and really support them. And I think it has to be everybody, not just one. I mean, we have children that are coming out of so many different situations at home that they need multiple support levels now, and teachers can't be that one and only frontline support.
Excellent.
I'd like to pick up on that point by Christy, because that's, again, in my research for today. And while we all have beautiful experiences, and I do believe we're coming from different parts of the world, so there's definitely a different focus, yet one of the elements of success in creating a good learning environment, of course, is the safety component, the creating of a family community, a healthy family community, I might add, where it's not about the blame culture. It's about the administrators working with the teachers, working with the parents, working with the kids, working with the monitors, working with the police enforcement, working collaboratively, having open forums, having open discussions, having opportunities to have interactions is such a key component to change the mindset, but also be collective and communal in the approach to education and re-education and continual education. And that might be, again, initiatives that one principal might start or one teacher might start, yet making these trust circles, making these community feedback circles a part of the process might be something that could be infused today.
Dave, I love what you said there, especially I love this trust circle. I love that phrase. I think it's a very powerful thing. If we could establish trust circles in our community, that would be really... Go ahead, Christy.
To reiterate just what Dave was saying, I absolutely agree, because as you know, especially for us right now, we're just trying to build a bridge on building that community connection and having that trusting, because especially in our community, there's a lot of our younger ones and our elders are still really untrusting of the education system. So that's one thing we're working on, is just building that bridge and building that trust in that education system, especially for Indigenous families who are sending a lot of children into a system that they really haven't felt like they were part of participating in a way of community. So that's one thing we're really, really trying to strive back towards, is that it's a community effort and that it has to be a trusting space.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love that concept of a trust circle. That's just sums it up all. We know exactly what that means, and it's so impactful. So thanks, Dave, for really, give us a little bit more insights on that. So yeah, and I think you're right. This is where it starts. So Sivam, you might want to take notes to have this on a continuing basis.
Well, why are you giving Sivam more homework? It's a Saturday. It's a non-school day. Don't give the man more homework. Come on now. Come on. It's all good. Just joke. Go ahead.
I want to respond briefly, Tammy, to your comment. I really like what you said, and particularly the part about schools needing more help. A wise person once said that if you want to know what somebody's real values are, look and see where they spend their money. So Dr. Vibe, my father was a public school teacher as well. And I grew up with him sitting at his desk and watched him become increasingly dissatisfied as his job became less. He left with the equivalent, he was an engineer. He left a well-paying job because he always wanted to teach. He got more and more dissatisfied with teaching because it became more babysitting. I always thought I would be a teacher. And when I finished graduate school and looked at the starting salary, I couldn't support a family on it.
Yeah.
So imagine a world in which teaching was the highest paid job you could aspire to when you finished college. If the best and brightest, that's the job. Instead of going to work in tech, imagine if teaching was the highest paid work available and the most satisfying. And that's where the top 10% of the class wanted to go.
Good point. Good point.
I would like to spin it one more time, if possible.
You're doing a good job at it, so keep it up.
In Malaysia, there's a school. It's called Dwi Imas International School. I put the link on. It's the #1 school for social entrepreneurship for children. And so can you imagine a world where teachers were actually encouraged to be entrepreneurial, social entrepreneurs, where it's not just about handouts, it's about creating ventures where it is collaborative, it is experimentative, it is creative. That's, again, a model for what some of my chats about today is that's part of their winning strategies is when you get communities coming together and having discourse and respectful conversations, ideology occurs. And so that's sort of what I'm looking to do is plant some seeds of best practices that I've been experienced and I've been blessed to be part of, because it is possible to improve whatever we're at right now. And some of the creativity on this board right now is very inspiring and exciting for me to be part of. So thank you very much.
Very
You know,
good.
you know what's funny?
Okay,
yeah.
let's go Christy, Oliver, and I think Willie wants to say something. So Christy, Oliver, Willie.
I'm just jumping in here quickly just to back up what Dave said. Actually, in a bunch of our Indigenous schools across Canada, we have a new program that's very much modeled off of that, where we're talking about they're actually gleaning certificates and stuff around social enterprise. And so they do workshops on how to do like public speaking and how to network and get those skills. And I do agree with Dave, it's just a much better modeling type of education system.
Oliver.
Yes, just basically on what Dave said, you know, it's funny, if you check the patterns of how the school systems been, you know, gradually, I would say improving, not really fast enough, but it is going to get to a point where Dave is the idea what Dave is saying, because I know of other countries are doing the same thing, and I've experienced other, you know, institutes are doing the same thing, and now, you know, with conversations like this and more of it, you know, the pattern is gonna move towards that school model. But we need to get there a little bit faster. We should have already been there because, you know, look at what's happening now. I remember when my youngest, one of my youngest is 13. When you first went to daycare, I thought they would have been learning math and all that stuff. They're learning and playing. That was new for me, learning and playing, right? You know, nowadays when the kids come home from school, I don't ask how school was, right? I just talk about, you know, different things. You know, did you crack a joke today? You know, what was the color of your teacher's shoes today? Like different stuff like that, because I'm trying to help them to shift that mindset around actual schooling. So, and you know, I can see some teachers are kind of doing their own thing. I know their hands are tied in terms of how they teach and how they communicate. Now they're going outside. Some teachers going outside in the summertime, they go outside and teach the entire class, you know? So, you know, these things are gonna change based on a pattern. I can see it moving towards that, but we want to push that a little bit quicker, faster.
Willie.
All right. Christy and Dave actually gave me a segue into promoting my programs. But I want to share this program with you also, maybe off the air too, Chrissy. I do 2 programs in the schools and in the community one is called From Boys to Men, where we work with boys middle school to high school And then we do another program called No Dream is Impossible with both boys and girls. And what we emphasize what is called right brain learning. And I don't know if any of you guys ever heard of right brain learning. Everything we do, I call it see no evil, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. And what we do is with hearing, we use audio books and we use audio tapes and things like that. So this way you give the kid the book, but you also have the audio playing for them. Because if you think about it, a lot of times the kids, they want to read the stuff, but because they're having problems with understanding and the comprehension, if they're hearing someone reading it to them while they're reading along, their comprehension picks up better. Then see no evil, we use videos and movies and things like that on history and whatever subjects we're talking about. We use that in the classroom. And then we stop periodically and ask questions. So that way we're making sure that they're comprehending and being able to answer the questions. And then for the speak no evil, we do public speaking. So we work on their public speaking. So they have to, instead of doing a written test, we give them, what's it called? I went blank that fast. But you know, oral test. So now they can do, instead of having to worry about writing out the answers, because a lot of times they can't, their spelling is off or their handwriting is bad. But if they can give an oral report on that information and be graded, it takes that fear away from all the things that we talked about, reading, writing, all the things that they have that fear about or that embarrassment about. It takes it away from them in the classroom. So we do these programs, and then we do entrepreneurship. We teach them we do savings, introduction to entrepreneurship. This year we brought in introduction to franchises, and then real estate, and then we do introduction to the stock market. And we're starting with kids in the 5th grade with this program. And so I tell kids, I want to give you 3 to 5 ways where you can make money so you don't have to turn to the streets, because our program, our motto is preparing young people for success and not the streets. So if you can take the idea of making that fast money off the street and use the things that we're showing you how to take your specialized skills and abilities. You have kids that are good at art. You have kids that are good at music and play an instrument, showing them how they can use those skills to make money and create businesses and opportunities for themselves. Then you show them how reading and writing pays off. You know, if you're doing a contract and you need to give this person a contract, you need to know what that contract says. You know what I mean? You're not saying you need to know how to read. You say you need to know what that contract says. Now they understand why they need to know how to read. If that person says they're going to give you 10% of that contract amount, you need to know what 10% is. What did you just tell them? You need to know math. So instead of saying you need to know reading, you need to know math, you need to do writing, we show them why they need to know it, and then they understand for themselves. And then that energy comes where now they walk back into the classroom where they weren't doing work, and now they're sitting in the front of the class raising their hand, because now they have an understanding of why they want to do the things that the teacher's been saying. Okay, you need to work on your reading and writing. Now they understand why they need to do it, because now I'm going to start my business and I need to know what that contract says. And I need to know what 10% of that contract amount is. And I need to know how to write out my contract. So now they put it all together and they have a reason to do the things that they're doing. And so we've been doing this about 5 years in the Western New York area. And we're actually doing something with the Ontario National Alliance of Black School Educators. We spoke at their conference last year, and I think we're going to be back there this year as well. So we are in Ontario as well.
Thank you, Willie, for sharing some of the stuff you and your organization are doing. Fantastic. I want to move on to another conversation piece. Get each one of your thoughts, if you're comfortable. What has the last 2 years, what impact has it had on kids and school safety? Because many of our kids have been doing it from home. Some of them have come back. You know, how has the impact of the last 2 years of what's going on in the world had on school and safety? Who would like to start?
I'll go. Oh, go ahead. Ladies first, Christy.
I was jumping in because nobody else was. We do see with the decline, especially, there's a lot of children, as we know, anybody in the education system that really, really struggles with this new online learning platform. So we are really, really seeing a decline in mental health, not only with the kids, but the families too, because again, doing homeschooling, trying to manage their own jobs and their own professions, Even myself, who works amongst the education system, is not doing very well with this online schooling. If we're grading teachers or if we're grading parents, I definitely got an F. And so, I mean, even that, and I also have a 5-year-old little guy here who I'm noticing what a dramatic decrease when it comes to socialization, those social skills, interacting with other people, other children, and the things that they're starting to worry about that they're kind of causing anxiety. Like our little guy, for example, we had coffee dropped off this morning. The only thing he could think of is the delivery driver didn't wear a mask. And we went on and on and on about that. So, I mean, there's a lot of things the school system, parents, all of us are just really, really tackling when it comes to especially mental health and this lockdown and them having to learn skills. And then, of course, when you're not good at those skills, just the impact, especially on boys' self-esteem, right?
Good stuff. Oliver.
Yeah, for me, it's a dramatic impact on both sides. It may sound contrary, but when this happened, I was like, yes, not that COVID is around, but I was just more, happy that parents are getting a more chance to spend more time with their child at home. So for the first 6 months, I'm like, yes. And even though there was lockdown, I'll be walking. I'll walk 5:30 in the morning and I'll see strollers or people still walking. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, right? Because life gets in the way before COVID, right, Dr. Vibe? And, whether you're dropping off your kids or soccer or basketball or swimming lessons or piano lessons and just busy home from work, sometimes they're having, dinner in the car just to get to practice. It's being so busy, we don't get a chance to connect. However, on the other hand, it's a big impact on the parent and the parent-child relationship, because now you're stuck at home with the kids. What do? You didn't have certain tools and strategies and techniques to kind of help them to log online or really now they need to actually wake up before they know they need to go to school at 9 o'clock or catch a bus, but now they're home, they can wake up anytime or go to bed late. So parents are like bombarded, don't have the necessary tools now to, get the kids in check or get the kids to a level where, just to create harmony at home where, the kids are self-sufficient. Now, watch this now. Now there's a bigger impact now in terms of parents' appreciation for teachers now. You see that big shift where they say, now when they open back a little bit, I'm not sure who is here in Canada, but we open a little bit and then we've gone back to shutdown. But regardless of that, just that transition itself, understand what it really takes to keep your child for 3-4 hours to focus on certain things or get him to do this or get him to do that, what the teachers are going through. So there's a big appreciation now for educators from the parents' perspective. So I would say it's make a big impact on all 3 levels.
Anybody else?
Just to respond to your question on a bigger scale, global scale, not global, but larger scale. Basically, what we've done in the last 2 years is we've just moved the locus of the problem from the schools to the home, but we didn't move any money along with it. So we just moved the problem someplace where there's fewer resources. How in the world are parents going to cope with it if schools, with all the resources they have, how's an individual or 2 parents or multiple parents? So it's very similar to what happens in this country. We argue back and forth about whether the federal government should be solving this. Federal government wants to push it off in the states, but they don't send taxes with it. They just want the states to take care of it. That's exactly what we've done.
Everyone seems to be nodding their head on that one. I want to dig deeper on that in regards to the pushing it to the home. How much of an impact, and I think we chatted about this earlier, but I want to really get down a little bit deeper about it, the home impact on safety in schools, especially at this time, because many of our young people are having anxiety, etc. So if they're having anxiety at home, how can we expect a school system that's underfunded, under-resourced to help with that challenge?
I wanted to jump in. I'm going to jump in on both of those because what Avram was saying about the parents in the home when the kids are sitting home, and I thought about this when the pandemic started. All the schools, all my like I said, all my programs, majority of my programs are in the schools. So when the schools shut down, all the programs and my activities shut down. And so these kids were at home in those situations that I talked about earlier, where, there may be, drugs, the parents may not have a good level of education. So now you can't expect them to deal with, or the parents may even be trying to figure out how they're going to feed the family during this pandemic. So you have so many things that parents are trying to deal with that education is the last thing on the list because normally they're sending that kid to school. Cause remember, they're putting it on the school to teach the kid. So that was one thing they never had to worry about having to deal with, or they even tried to deal with. So now that is put on them on top of all the other things that they are already dealing with at home. And now there's no source of income. And so what we found is that, like I said, when my program started, and you can see behind me, I'm always just talking about what I do. I love talking about what I do. Um, when school shut down, I started thinking about the young men and the young people that we work with, and so especially my young men, and I said they're not able to get what I was doing, what we were doing in the classroom in our program. They weren't able to get that anymore at home. So what I created was the books you see behind me. It's called From Boys to Men, and this was our middle school book. And so I created this book, and I got sponsors, and we were able to give the books out to the kids that were in the programs that were in my programs prior. And then we were actually doing some other stuff. Schools in Rochester, New York heard about me, and they called me and they were asking about doing, wanting the books and doing things. Because again, the books, we do all the things that I talked about, but then in the back of every book, there's journal pages. Remember, I talked about boys don't like to write. There's journal pages. So now they can write down their thoughts, they can write down their ideas. So this way they can go back, because that's what we talk about all the time is being able to track your ideas. Girls, I talk about girls all the time in my programs. Girls, when they were little girls, they had journals. They wrote their journals. They can go back years later and look at things that they thought about, things and ideas they had and what they wanted to do. Boys don't do that. Boys didn't have those opportunities. So what they do is boys try to remember everything. And what happens? They become stressful. They start one thing, they quit another thing, they start another thing, they quit another thing. And when Rochester contacted us, they were asking us about their high school program. Remember, I told you this was the middle school book. The questions they started asking me, do you talk to the kids about COVID? Do you talk about, go to college, go to high school, vocational training, all these different things? I say, no, this is a middle school. This is a middle school. By the time I got off that phone, I had created all the chapters for a high school book for that program and sent it to the Rochester school district so they can work with their Rochester's high school students. Because again, these kids are sitting at home and they need something that they weren't going to get at home from the parents. So they're able to give these books to the kids. So this way they can use these opportunities to do some of the things that they would have done in the programs back in the schools. So you have to get, like you said, you have to give the parents something to work with. They don't know what to work with. They don't know what to do because a lot of them probably weren't checking homework or anything else. So they don't know what the kids were working on in the first place. And a lot of times they didn't understand it themselves because they may have been a dropout or they were falling behind in the classroom. So they're not prepared. So
Right.
what we did was we created these things to arm them so that way at least it gives them something that they can work with their kids and with all their kids in the household.
Okay. Thank you, Willie. Anyone else want to add in regards to home life impacting school safety life?
Thank you, Dr. Vibe. I find it fascinating to sit here and ponder what has decreased in schools in the last couple of years. And it's probably one of the areas that schools have been focusing on the most, and that's bullying. So I have a feeling with no classes, it's probably been less bullying. And when I went around and I chatted with people in India and Malaysia and Canada and the States and asked them about it, most schools these days in the last 15 or 20 years have really created zero tolerance for bullying programs. Now, whether they're working or not, that's not my discussion yet. I would like to make that comment. And then the other area is, can we explore what does abuse mean? And so in Canada, there's actually a law that's up right now for debate, discussion, and votes, and it's called Loverin's Law, and it's about teaching young people about abuse, because abuse is just not sexual abuse. There can be physical abuse. There's different types of abuse, and so there's Loverin's Law, which I'll put in the comments, and I'm inviting the panelists and our guests to go and do a little research, because so much of what we can be is either part of the problem or part of the solution. And part of the solution is often getting involved and become more aware and educated and learn. And Loverin's Law is a law that's right now, it would include teaching our young kids, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, about the Indigenous experience and talking about different types of abuse. And the teachers, the administrators, the parents would actually have an evolving learning and appreciation, and perhaps even more compassion for what is abuse. And those discussions, talking about abuse with a young child, may or may not, I'd actually be interested in what Avram has to say about that, as is it healthy to have conversations about a topic like abuse with a child?
Really good stuff. Before we move further, I just want to do a reset, because we're about halfway through. So for those who are watching live or on replay, we're having a conversation, a healthy generation, creating safe schools, a distinguished panel discussion, and we're having some outstanding commentary. So I just want to do a reset, because we're about halfway through right now. And I love what you had to say, Dave, because bullying not only happens face-to-face, but there's the whole aspect of online bullying.
Virtual, yeah.
That's a whole conversation in itself. But Dave, you wanted Avron to jump in. So Avron, go ahead, please.
I wasn't sure I understood the question, Dave. What would be the reason not to talk to children about abuse?
Well, again, as we're probably have some awareness that when a child is abused, often the abuser will say, "No, don't talk to anyone about that. Don't mention that. Like, it's our little secret." So there's that stereotypical conversation or relevant conversation that comes in, that children are therefore experienced with shame and embarrassment about being subjected to different types of abuse.
Well, a colleague of mine once gave the simplest definition, or the simplest way to know whether you should be worried whether your behavior is unethical. And she said, if there's anything going on in your office that you don't want somebody else to know about, it's probably unethical. So what I would teach kids is, nobody should tell you not to talk about anything. Exactly. Anytime somebody says to you, don't tell anybody this, you should, unfortunately, you should be, whether it's your teacher or your mother or your neighbor, or there's no good reason for you not to tell me, your father, or whoever. There's no reason for you to be keeping a secret, and you shouldn't.
Thank you.
I was just on a panel on Monday night. We do this group called the Counselor's Corner on another group, a podcast. And we actually had the same discussion about mental illness. And, people think of mental illness, but they don't think about all the different aspects of mental illness. You can have or mental health. And when you talk about bullying, people just think of someone physically bullying you. But there's so many aspects of bullying, like you said, verbal bullying, virtual bullying. Bullying because of your clothing, because you didn't, how you smell, how you look, kids, when they don't really think about some of the things they're doing as being bullying, or I was just out, because what will happen, you hear them say, well, I was just playing with them, because a lot of times they don't realize when they hear bullying, they say, well, I didn't touch them. That's the first thing they'll say. I didn't touch them. And they say, no. But what you're doing is bullying. And see, that's the thing, that they have to understand, that bullying is more than just one thing. Just like mental health, there's more than just a person that's walking around, doing whatever, they consider crazy or whatever. You hear people say, oh, he's crazy. Oh, that's mental health. No, but there's other things. You can have a broken heart, and that could be affecting your mental health. You can have, you can have lost your job and be in depression. That's mental health. So, we have to help our kids understand what bullying is. So that way, a lot of times, like I said, they don't know. They don't even realize, sometimes they don't even realize that they're bullying another kid. Oh, I was just playing with them. I didn't touch them. And that's the first thing you hear them say, because in their mind, bullying is hitting someone or pushing someone, those kind of things. So helping them to understand what bullying is, that's the first thing we have to address. And from there, then you'll see a lot of things die down, because then they'll realize that, okay, I better not do this because this is bullying.
That's a point that I wanted to pick up, Willie, is that I agree with you, yet it's just not the kids, it's the parents that need to be
Well, yeah.
educated about verbal, emotional,
Yeah.
physical, domestic violence, sexual abuse, neglect. These are all parts of abuse, which then has a whole realm of impacts on mental stability, mental health, mental wellness. And that education is the community again. Because it's teachers also, they might not be educated on this, and they require the training, the development. And again, it's continual learning, yet also application of these very important components of building a healthy community.
Better lifestyle. And I just you know, like I said, I hate just pumping my chest, but I was telling Savon earlier, I said I just started a nonprofit here in Niagara Falls called A Better You Lifestyle. Physical, personal, financial development. Like I said, the things we were doing with the kids, we now do with the teachers and the families at home. So we're trying to do just what you just said, Dave, where we're taking the things that we're teaching these kids, bullying and those kind of things or whatever we're doing with them, financial literacy, all those things, and we're showing the teachers and we're also showing the families. So this way it becomes a family activity versus just a kid learning in school and going home trying to tell his parent what he did in school, and the parent looking at him like, what are you talking about? We created this nonprofit now where we're getting funding where we can do family activities with these this same concept. So you're absolutely correct with what you're saying, Dave, about you got to start at home, but the way you do it is you have to find the way to bring it into where you're bringing the whole family together and creating those opportunities for them to learn as a whole.
So Dave, it's interesting you mentioned, and it was rolling around in my alleged mind that one of the questions was, you know, should our educators be trained with this? But now you've made it better. You've made it's got to be a community education. It's not just for the schools. And the question is, how important is it? And are our parents willing to commit? I know the teachers would be, but are our parents willing to commit to get that education? Because go ahead, Christy, please.
From personal experience, this is one thing I actually do go around and talk about to educators, parents, and other things like that, because I am a mother who did experience boys cyberbullying. It started on the internet, high school boys. And the next thing you know, I was a mother sitting in intensive care because my son was in a coma with 4 skull fractures and 2 brain bleeds due to a video recorded fight. And it had all started online bullying. And that had gone on for quite some time. And before we got to where we were, going back and sitting at the table with many, many people, one thing we did bring out of that is how other people had contributed to that without even realizing they were contributing into it. Other teachers, other professionals were contributing to it without even realizing they were. And it wasn't until we had to go back to the table for a very serious conversation for everybody to sit at that table and really realize that we had failed as a community. There were so many, and I mean, we had multiple incidences in this school, not just with my son, but I think in a 3-month span, to the point that we had almost an all-out brawl in front of our school with boys. And it was just, and it had all started originally, most of these cases, with the online bullying, because they have so much access to online, whether it be at school, at home, with their friends, that isn't monitored. And I agree, a lot of people just don't realize how much they themselves too, if we don't know what bullying is, if we don't know what abuse is, if we don't know what those real things are, we ourselves can fail our children. Teachers, as much as they think they're helping, could be part of the fail if they aren't trained or educated in that. But I think parents especially need to be more educated on what parts we play, and especially active listening and really paying attention to what is going on when these kind of situations ensue with our boys. Because I don't think our boys realize that it can escalate so badly and life changes can be made. It starts out, boys being boys, they're just going to call each other names, and then it's going to escalate from there. And then we're in a situation where police and a hospital and everybody else is involved.
Just want to add a comment here from Tammy saying, I am an aspiring parenting coach wanting to specialize in bullying. I have seen that now kids are going back to school in person. Bullying is rough and they hide it so no one sees them doing it. Like the conversation earlier about kids being bullied at home and keeping quiet. I agree with Dave that the parents need education about bullying as well. Anyone
Yeah,
want to
if you don't,
go
yeah,
ahead?
sure.
Go ahead, Alvin.
It's interesting, Dr. Vibe and Dave. When the pandemic started, I was in the, I started writing a speech when everything opened back up. This is going to be my keynote. All parents are bullying their kids. And I know it's going to be very touchy, but it's needed. What happened is, we all know, we throw these words out there, not understanding how deep it is. Hurt people hurt people. And there's a trickle-down effect. Obviously, we were raised a certain way. So if we don't have the proper tools, and like Dave was saying, and how to connect with our kids emotionally, not just love them and give them ice cream or give them iPod or whatever it is, how to connect with them emotionally. And then once you start connect with them emotionally, 80% of your battle is pretty much done in any relationship. And, just simple communication will really lessen our fear of frustration. When we are frustrated as parents, we're automatically going to bully our child. And let's take bully word, because bully might be very triggering for some people. Let's take it down a notch to say trauma. Did you know that as simple as a parent not saying I love you to a child, that can cause trauma?
Yep.
Simple as that. That can cause trauma. Because why? Because one of the most important needs, we're all human being needs. We only have 3 needs: psychological needs, emotional needs, cognitive needs. One of them is love. Not after you chastise the child and say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I love you. The damage is already done in the subconscious mind. So now when it comes to the other side of bullying, for your child not to get bullying, there's certain things you can equip your child with at home so they're not being a victim. We already know the bully person, we already know where that comes from. Hurt people hurt people. There's also ways to, flip that, but it's really more important for your child not to be in that situation of being bullied. It's how you really connect with them at home. What are the conversations you have with them at home? Like Dave mentioned, are we talking to our 4-year-old about sex? Are we talking about certain trauma? Are we talking about certain bullying? What kind of conversation are we having? Obviously, when I say 4 and 3-year-old, it's age-appropriate content. But there's age-appropriate content from 3-year-old all the way to teenager when it comes to, whether it's sexual trauma, whether it's physical trauma, emotional trauma, cyberbully trauma. All these things can really point down to what are the conversations having at home. So I totally agree with Dave when it comes to that's where the core is. Obviously, village, aka trusted circle. Obviously, everyone needs to play a part, but the core of that is the parents and the home.
Also,
Christy, just hold on, because I think Avron unmuted before you. Sorry about that. So Avron, then we have Christy.
Yeah.
Everyone's jumping in. I love it. So I'm just managing. You guys are driving. So I'm ruddering the ship. You guys are driving it. So Avron, you first.
I want to offer a slightly different perspective, but I think could be helpful. I think we're a little lost in the weeds with trying to define what is and what is not bullying, or what is not abuse, when it's all subjective. And so there's a different way to approach it. There's a principle of Jewish ethics, which is that you're responsible for the impact of your words on another person, whether you intended it or not.
Hey.
And so what we could teach kids is not so much this behavior is okay and this behavior, but to be responsive. So if Willie says to me, Avram, what you just said really offended me. I don't understand how what I said offended him, but I owe him the courtesy of hearing him out and being interested in understanding. So I think more broadly, what we could be teaching kids is be responsive and care about the impact of your words and behavior. Even if you don't understand it, you have a responsibility in every relationship to listen.
Nice.
And that
Christy?
takes me to my comment around that, in the way of just, sorry, my train of thought kind of got all over the place. The main thing is, especially with voice supports, the problem we have is like, for instance, our example, we had two young boys that had come out of serious trauma situations within their life, who we had families sitting there had been trying to access supports outside of school for these boys for a long, long time. And there just wasn't supports to access. So that's one thing we have to talk about too, is like parents can try their hardest to go out and get active supports to help for those things that do transpire over into school. But if some of those services aren't available for our boys, then we're kind of back in the same situation of offering them nothing.
Good stuff. Anyone else want to add on to what's been flowing right now?
Yes, I just want to tag on to what Avram just talked about. We know emotional intelligence is key. And because it's a big word, it's very simple to teach a child, as young as 3 years old. Simple, start with the I statement, exactly to what Avram was saying. The I statement. The I statement is, you label your feeling. I feel hurt. I feel disrespectful when you do this. And you follow up with another I statement. I would love for you to, leave me alone. I would love for you to ask me when you take my stuff. You are labeled, it is for you. It's not for the other person. So, and these are little things that we can teach our kids by role playing and modeling it ourselves with our kids. Yes, you can tell your kids you feel hurt when they talk to you a certain way. Of course, we all have souls. It's going to really seep through that child, no matter how old the child is, whether they're a teenager or they're 3-year-old. They'll start to understand. They'll use the same language, not only to you, but with their friend as well. So emotional intelligence can be taught, and that's where part of the core is when it comes to, I just want to kind of add on to what Avram was just talking about.
Avram, we've had a request for you to repeat that quote that you gave us about being responsible for our words. If you could do that, it'd be appreciated.
It's not a quote. It's in the Jewish ethics from the Jewish religion. It's a principle. It's an aspiration that you hold yourself responsible for the impact of your words on others, and saying I didn't mean it is not really relevant, that we're all responsible. It's actually an interesting subset of that. It's actually speaking ill of another person is considered a worse offense than stealing, because stealing you can pay back. And words that hurt somebody, there's no way to take them back.
Love that. Love that.
And since we like metaphors,
go ahead, Dave.
A wonderful metaphor is that many people think their words, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. The idea of words, WRDS, turn it around and you get sword. And sometimes our words can cut people worse than a sword. And so, again, a beautiful lesson today and practical teaching tool could be, again, sharing how important our words are, our words that we use on ourselves and the words that we express to others. So that mirror can be part of the journey forward. And a school that does this brilliantly is in Finland. It's actually, they've come up with an app. It's called the Mighty Fire from Finland. And I am inviting our panels to go and maybe look at Finland, because their playful way of teaching and educating is magnificent. And so just a little bit of pick me up for allowing our words to uplift instead of beat down.
Yeah, one of the things I say is, go ahead, Oliver.
Yeah, I just want to jump on that. They're very well said, Dave. If you notice now, affirmations are coming out. In my course, I have a whole module, a whole hour and 20 minutes. I teach about words. Very interesting about words. For example, to Dave's point, there's a big difference between praise and encouragement. We use praise thinking that we're encouraging the child, and praise is very devastating. I'm just going to leave it like that.
Just like the words inclusion and acceptance we use in
Correct. There you go. Correct. All right. These are sword can really pierce through you.
Excellent. I'll drop it here because I don't know if, but especially when it comes to our young people, they emulate what they replicate. So whether it's words, whether it's actions, so especially to the parents they're watching here, they're going to duplicate. They're watching you. They're watching you. So when they do something, don't be surprised when you ask them and say, why did you do that? Well, I saw you say that. I saw you do that.
That's right.
So be very aware of that. And not only how they act at home, but how they act at school.
That's right.
Which is why I'm going to make it clear for my children who are watching. Again, I always make sure that you may not have meant to offend somebody. And you can explain that, but you don't get to actually control whether that person is offended or not. You can always apologize if you didn't intend on offending or upsetting somebody, but you still have to take the responsibility that you did, and you need to go and deal and address that situation, because we are not all equipped the same. We are not built the same, and not something that bothers one person bothers the other, and vice versa.
Good stuff. Well, as we carry on the conversation, and everyone's doing an outstanding job, which I knew you would, there's an entity that we haven't even talked about yet. So I'm going to drop them in here. Government. What's the government's role in all this madness? Because they, in the most part, do fund schools. I know in the United States, they have charter schools, but here in Canada, most of our schools are, well, I think all our schools are government. What is their role in this?
And for us, it's actually federal, because Indigenous schools on territories are run by federal government.
There you go again. So that's there. You go.
I wanted to clarify that, because a lot of people believe that even Indigenous schools are under provincial. No, it is not. Every Indigenous school is still run under the Indian Act, which means it's still federal jurisdiction. There is still laws that state that Indigenous children by law have different regulations and standards they have to follow, and the parents have to follow, versus Canadian standards for children in education.
Oh, wow.
Interesting point. Very good point. I'm sure a lot of people did not realize that in Canada and maybe outside of Canada. So what do we say about our government and how they're handling this situation? Avram, go ahead.
Well, their research suggests there are two major contributors to violence in kids, and particularly gun violence. And one is what's called gender role conflict, which I'll explain in a moment, and the other is sort of a desensitization to violence. The first one, the government doesn't really have a lot to do with. Gender role conflict is for boys, because of course we are talking about boys committing the preponderance of violence. Gender role conflict is the gap between who I believe I'm expected to be as a man and who I actually think I am as a man. And the bigger that gap, the more stress, the more distress for boys. And that leads to hypermasculine defenses, which are things like violence. I don't think there's a lot the government can do about that. That's the patriarchy. And if we're going to change that one, we're going to have to change the whole culture. So that's a job beyond this group. The other one is there's some pretty convincing data that violence is more likely to happen when kids are desensitized to violence. I'll give you a great example. The US military found out after World War II that an alarming percentage of soldiers never fired their weapons at the enemy. They just did like this, right? So they changed the training, and they changed the targets from bullseyes to silhouettes of people. They desensitized soldiers to fight, which is not a natural, easy thing to do. They desensitized them to shooting another human being, and the rate of people who fired their weapons at the enemy went up dramatically. So all the stuff we expose kids to, all the violence, it's pretty hard to turn on television, social media, etc., without seeing shocking violence, it does have an impact on kids. The shooters from Columbine not only obsessively played violent video games, but they practiced their marksmanship on those games to where they became outstanding marksmen by working at it on the video games. I do think government has a role there because we have to decide as a society, you know, we do have restrictions on press. You can't print whatever you want to say in a newspaper. We hold people accountable. We don't do that on social media. And I think as a culture, we're going to have to decide, are we going to regulate social media?
Good point. Who wants to add on?
I have a question for him, actually.
Go ahead.
Just the thought process, especially for when you're looking at underprivileged Indigenous children, all children actually who are coming out of poverty and stuff like that. One thing we've been looking at is amongst Indigenous community is the normalization, unfortunately, of the violence and the bullying and things like that, because our communities have just become so relevant. I really would like to know what you think about that part. In a lot of, I think educators don't realize when you're bringing children in from certain situations, it's very normalized behavior to them, as shocking as it is to others. So that also puts an influence where you get the shocking part of the adult in the room, whereas with the child, it's very, very normalized. So when they're in the classroom, they don't see it any different.
I wasn't sure, Chrissy, were you asking me?
Yes, sorry.
That's fine. I think it's a great example. I mean, we know that men who commit crime, violence in the home are more likely to have been victimized themselves. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, is that if you see conflict resolved through violence in your home growing up, it's normalized. You're desensitized to that as a means of, I hate to call it conflict resolution, but it's not, but as a way of expressing yourself when you don't know what else to do.
Excellent. Anyone else want to add to the recent commentary in regards to the government? What is their role in all of this?
I think that's part of the problem, is they need to understand what their role is in this. I think a lot of parents don't understand what the government's role is, and vice versa, right? I think it's always this back and forth finger pointing, I guess you'd say, the parents pointing at the government that they need to fix this, and the government saying, well, you're the parents, you need to fix this. And I don't think there's a real, like Dave was saying, I think there's some clear stuff that needs to be made aware to parents, educators, and all that of what these kinds of things look like and mean. And I think we all just need to really, really go back to understanding what those roles are with our children in the education system. What are the parents' roles? What are the teachers? And then, of course, the government. They need to be held accountable for their side of things. And they're very good at, you know, passing the buck on to especially teachers.
I thank you for sharing. I would love to have the phrase public-private policy to be something that we could individually and collectively explore. It's we work in a country, in North America, in a planet that sometimes the government doesn't seem to be aligned with your goals, our goals, my goals. And that's where, again, social entrepreneurs make a lot of sense, is that social entrepreneurs are going to find the pathways to implement new policies, new programs that the government might be way behind because they're doing their governmental issues. So public-private policy is something that, as a growing entrepreneur venture, if you go from your city to your state to your country to around the world, there's going to be some governments that don't agree with your new policies. And that's something that will find the path of least resistance. I'm finding it quite ironic that we saw a little bit of business last week in the States, where you saw the leaders of a number of the traditional auto companies all visit with the president, whereas the one who seems to be making the biggest disruption in the economic world in EVs wasn't invited. So as a entrepreneur, do you think he's really upset and pissed off, or he just keeps doing what he's going to do? So if you're on to something that really is wonderful and it is having an impact and you're able to grow your ideas with confidence, it might be the government coming aboard a year or 3 years or 5 years. They might follow you. So the idea of public-private policy put it in your tree planting arbitorium and see how that can grow in the next year.
I have a
That's
question about that. Do you know, for education system under federal policy, if that still works? Because again, under the Indian Act, unfortunately, there's a lot of things around education. I'm not sure if you're aware at one time, if an Indigenous male took on higher education, they were actually enfranchised, and those kinds of things. So I'm just like, I mean, it's a great theories, and we would love those kinds of things. I'm just wondering if the federal government, if you think, would let go enough for us to explore that, because unfortunately under Ontario, yes, we could, but because for Indigenous schooling, it automatically goes back to federal. I think definitely it needs to be spoke about more, and I'm wondering if we could get some more info from you later on how that would look on a federal platform.
Well, I guess the point would be that, again, I'm familiar with in other countries because I've been involved in programs where they're new programs. The government didn't want to support it. They were still moved forward. It was positive. And then eventually, after a number of years, it was able to get a stamp of approval. Yet in extracurricular activities, in different types of trainings, people development, many of the things that I believe that Mr. Pierce would be doing is it's not stamped by the government yet it then becomes accepted after a few pilot projects. And I think that would be public policy as one key phrase, and then pilot projects. And those pilot projects that could be collaborative could really have a starting of a change. And I think that's one of the things that, as we hear each other's views, is that there's many change makers on this panel. And it is wonderful. And I think Dr. Vibe's been involved with change makers in the Afro-Caribbean community in banking. And so there's different ways it can be initiatives, pilot projects, and this will change policy, because we can't expect the policy to be changed positively all the time by the government. I don't think that is the winning strategy.
Agreed.
Yeah, you see, Dr. Vibe, the government is going to always play their role. And until they, and just to your point there, Dave, they're not really behind. They know what they're doing. And there's a strategy.
Absolutely.
We call it systems, right? There's a strategy. We call it system. You have to remember the school system is there to school you, not to educate you. There's a big difference. So now when you talk about schooling is a big, maybe, I'm not sure, you guys can correct me, I don't know, but it's a big part of funding from the government. So the school system, obviously they're going to tweak things a little bit to make it get better. And I talked about earlier that it's not fast enough. They're going at their own pace, because now it's a system to produce opposite from what Dave was talking about, to produce workers, not for entrepreneurs, not for people or freedom thinker, not for people who think outside the box, not for people who wants to start their own business, not for people who wants to start a pilot project or a private pilot project. That's why they're going to be against it. So the school system, or no, I should say the government is doing what the government does. They're going to stay in their lane. They're going to keep pointing fingers. They're going to do what they need to do and keep the ball rolling. They tweak things a little bit to make some people happy, but it is what it is, because school, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, school is to school you, it's not to educate you. There's a big difference.
You weren't supposed to tell that, Oliver.
I got to be honest. I got to be honest with myself. I got to be honest with my people, especially with my clients.
I understand.
All right. Anyone wanting to add on to that commentary there about the government's role? Everyone's happy with the government? All right, okay.
No, but I think maybe we should talk about this on a different show.
All right.
We could do a whole show on just government policy around education.
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
this-
for sure.
Well, this is the thing, because I they fund the schools, the majority of schools, and we're talking about violence in the school system. I don't hear a lot of government people talking about it. I hear things maybe at the municipal in Canada, municipal and provincial level. Federal level, I don't hear about it, but and the municipal level. But again, government's in place to govern, and they have an agenda. And And as Oliver said, it's system. So I think in order to get the government to get on board, it's a system. It takes a system to beat a system.
Correct. And you can create a system of what Dave was talking about. What is it called, Dave? Private something. There's 3 Ps. That's all I know.
Public-private policy.
There
And
you
again,
go.
it's like a way that a business, a social entrepreneur venture might look at ways to work with the government. Yet what you said is that there's systems in place. Sometimes the systems can accelerate, sometimes they can decelerate your initiatives. We as people who are looking to make a positive change, we can let it totally stop us and say this law is preventing us from doing it. Yet you'll notice that many of the change makers often do things outside of the system, and then the system catches up. Yet not in all cases, yet perhaps in some of the cases that if you're looking to, or like some of the entrepreneurs on this panel are doing, is that they're implementing new things that gets away from just studying the rote, training the worker bee, and encouraging the creativity, the collaboration, the creation of projects, pilot projects that could make a difference.
Nice. We've touched on it a little bit, and we do got some time, I think, to chat about it. What's the role of media and culture in all this madness?
You said what?
You know, because I know that I think Avram mentioned about how much impact media and culture, and I think some others have mentioned media and culture. If we had a crystal ball, because obviously we're not happy with media and culture when it comes to the portrayal of violence and how they're impacting our young people, what would you like to see change? Like if you had the perfect world in regards to this conversation, what would you like media and culture to change?
I would make social media responsible for their content the same way that news networks are. The New York Times ran a story a number of years ago that there was a debate in the paper about whether or not to use, and I don't want to make this political, so I'm not trying to make a political point. They spent months agonizing about whether to use the word liar in reference to the President of the United States. And they published an editorial that described the painstaking detail they went into, and they gave you the arguments pro and the arguments con, and how many hundreds of hours went into deciding whether or not that word was justified. That's news.
Wow.
There's no controls, no limits, so nobody's responsible. They can say whatever they want, and that is proving to be an enormous problem.
And it's interesting how from every few months or every few years, the Congress in the United States will bring all these tech companies and say they're going to do this, that, and the other thing. What happens? Nothing.
But the problem is they're not news. Again, I'm using a political example. I hope not to offend, but Tucker Carlson was sued for what he said on the air. And in his defense, he said, "I can't believe people confuse what I'm saying for news." The man himself said it's not news, but we don't differentiate. And so for the consumer, how, Obama was interviewed after his presidency. He said when he grew up, it didn't matter which news network you watched, you got basically the same news. Maybe your family watched Walter Cronkite, your family watched Harry Reasoner, but you saw the same story with a slightly. Now, if you turn on different channels, you would think you're seeing an entirely different story.
Okay, excellent. Anyone else want to add on to that? News culture, especially when it comes to our young boys and safety.
I think a lot of it is again, like we go back to my book project, a lot of it is normalizing, proper behavior for boys, especially in media, showing more positive stories, showing boys and men in positions of, problem solving and just more of that positive thing. And then when you go into an ethnic stance, again, media has a horrible portrayal of all of us, and that needs to stop because some of our boys, especially like ethnic boys, think it's like a standard that they need to, rise to, like as some sort of challenge, that's what's expected of them, and that's the goal. And that's where a lot of our confusion comes from, especially our young ethnic men who think that media has taught them that the best way to live is to be slinging drugs and beating people up and that kind of thing. And it's horrible that they feel that's the proper standard and goal that they would like to achieve. And that is due to
Again,
media, social media, when they post these pictures, you know, we all see them, the GQ guys and all of that. And of course, they got 50 followers going, yeah, look at you, you're cool.
again, you know, so social media or just the media is normalizing confusion. Guess what? It's also entertaining to some people. So we have to understand that. So yes, we can say they play a big role. Yes, the government might put some restriction on the content and stuff like that. But when you have boys and teenagers going out there with low self-esteem, no sense of direction, yada, 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 you name it, then guess what? These entertaining conversation, these entertaining news, or this confusion is going to work for, I don't know, for the system, or is just going to work. There's nothing around that. So again, it's back to, you know, back to the base, back at home, right? How are we making sure our teenager or boys or just our kids, our loved ones, self-sufficient, resilient, confidence, self-esteem, you name it. So what? Even with some of us, we're watching the news. Sometimes we chose not to watch the news. What make us do that? What make us do that? Think about that, right? Because we develop certain skill set. So because we know that the more we think or see and hear certain things, no matter how you say you're resilient, no matter how you say you have mentors and this and that, it's going to tend to seep in your subconsciousness, and then it's going to come out in a physical form somehow. So some of us decide not to really watch the news. And, you know, obviously we can't tell our kids not to. We have to actually teach them and teach certain skills on how to see it or don't see it, and how to protect yourself. So, I mean, the media is going to be the media, just like anything else.
The media is a system. It's there.
Correct.
It's there to make money. It's another system.
There you go. There you go.
I'll give you a very small everyday example that happened last night. My wife and I were watching the new James Bond movie, which is great. At the end of the movie, of course, Bond's approaching the villain, the arch villain, and he gets shot like multiple times and keeps going and then wrestles with the arch villain, right? Multiple bullet wounds in him. I heard a historian talking once about what actually happens when you get hit with this. You know, you see all the time, got hit in the shoulder. And then if you get hit in the shoulder with a slug from a Colt 45, it blows your arm off. So we show this, you know, this diluted, romanticized picture of what happens. That's not what happens when you get shot.
Yeah.
You don't get up and then wrestle with the guy.
Well, that's exactly why you have to, when we were talking earlier about kids in video games, they play these games where they're shooting and killing and this, that, and the other, but after a while, it just becomes a game to them. So the reality of actually shooting and hurting someone doesn't come into mind when they're doing a lot of things that they're doing. Like you were talking about with the target practice with the military. They changed the targets to silhouettes of a human, and then the people were more apt to do it because now they're shooting at a target versus an actual human. You know, if you think about it, most kids don't really watch the news. They watch TikTok and they watch these reels. And from that's where they get a lot of their information. And then peer pressure. Peer pressure is where the major influence of all our kids are. You know, you can have the best kid with the best parents and the best upbringing, but when he gets in school and he gets around his peers and he wants to fit in, he's going to start doing things that he would never do around his parents when he goes back home. But in that classroom, he's going to try to fit in because you don't want to be the misfit, because what happens? You get bullied, you get picked on. So you're going to do things. So I hear news, like I said, most of the kids don't watch the news. They get what they hear from their friend, their peers, the peer pressure, and then they're watching this TikTok and these reels. And I was just watching the reel. I was flipping through some reels this morning before I came on, and I was just watching this reel about this guy, I guess one of the famous rappers or drug dealers, whoever he was. And he had this guy standing next to him, handing him stacks of money, and he's just throwing dollar bills up in the air. These kids are seeing these things. I want to be like that. I want to have all these people around me, and I'm throwing up money, and my friends are, my friends. These people are looking to me for these things, and that's what they're looking for: approval and glorification of these kind of things, of violence. Most of these drug dealers, I mean not drug dealers, these rappers and people you hear, the kids look up to. They're talking about, every song you listen to is about killing somebody or selling drugs or something that half of them never did, and then you do have some that have done it, and then you hear about them later becoming famous, and then what happens to them? They stay in that same neighborhood and they get executed, So and it's just so much that these kids see and go through that you won't see in the media, that they're not showing that side of the media to the kids or talking about that side of the media, because to keep that behavior going is where so many other government entities profit from being able to say, we're going to service those acts. But if you eliminate those, you're cutting somebody's budget.
Exactly.
So
we cannot forget the capitalistic element,
yes.
Underlying element in our conversation, because let's put it, violence is big business.
Yes.
Avron, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to add a personal touch to this. I've interviewed hundreds of violent men. So I've worked in the prison system, and I've worked a lot with combat veterans. I've interviewed hundreds of men who have done absolutely horrific things. And only twice have I met a man who scared me. Only twice have I met a man who I thought, you know what? We should lock you up and throw away the key. It's not in our interest for you ever to get out. Only 2 times. Many of the men that I met who committed atrocities in war, I'd be happy for them to marry my sister. Wow. They're the most delightful, down-to-earth, caring. So these are not bad people we're talking about. Mm-hmm. These are people who, if you met them, you would like them.
It's interesting because a lot of men, especially as we have a high number of Indigenous men incarcerated, and a lot of it is they get into situations where they think it's killed or be killed.
Avram, just to delve a little bit deeper, and maybe a generalization, these men that you've had those conversations with, what were their boyhoods like?
That's exactly the right question. So I never remember the numbers on these things, but sure. Let's say 1 in 100 felonies gets arrested, whatever the number is. It's a lot. It's a big number. So 1 in 100 gets arrested, and then another one of those 50 or whatever goes to prison. So if crime is the least demanding occupation in the world, there's no education, there's no job interview, right? It's the job anybody can do, and you have to be really, really bad at it to get caught enough times to go to prison. So if you're in prison, you really suck at the easiest job in the world.
Well, and it's crazy because unfortunately my son is one of those, my oldest is an Indigenous male incarcerated. And I agree with you. When he went in as a mother, I was just shocked. But in the first week of the phone calls, and oh, hey, mom, do you know so-and-so's in here? And hey, mom, I seen so-and-so.
Wow.
And a woman in my position what are half your friends? Like, that's not how my son was raised. But again, it's this bar they kind of put up against each other, right? And I'm sorry, I agree. Every single one of them in there is because they're horrible at what they're doing. They just don't know any other way.
So these are kids who fell off the rails.
Yeah.
When you listen to the history, they weren't like the valedictorian and then robbed the liquor store. Exactly. These are kids who you could see were off the rails and were falling through the cracks from an early point in their life. And again, as you listen to the histories, it's not a surprise that you're seeing them where you're seeing them, because if you can't hold the job for a variety of reasons, and most of the reasons that people can't keep work. It's nothing to do with intelligence or skill. It has to do with showing up, having the life skills to wake up in the morning and show up. It's the number one reason kids fail out of college. They fail all their morning classes, you know? So if you can't like get up in the morning and get dressed, you know, SS and S.
I know what you mean by that.
I'm not supposed to say one of those.
I know that. I know what you
Right.
mean.
Blank, shower, and shave.
Exactly.
Right. Then you're not going to be able to keep a job. And if you talk to employers, their number one complaint is people don't show up for work, or they show up high, or they show up and leave. So we're talking about very basic stuff. And if you grew up in a chaotic family, if you see your mom and dad getting up every morning, routinely, regularly, getting up, SSS, go to work, that's what's normal to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what
ahead,
happens
Christy.
is, like for my son, what happened was all that goes on in our home. But what happened is, with his own mental health issues, being diagnosed really young, he was constantly the bad kid because he was still working on, getting programming to make those better decisions and giving him those skills. But in the meantime, their solution was to keep putting him in detention with this whole group of kids that they deemed as bad kids. And then guess what group grew up together, played together, and are still playing together now behind bars. It's the same group of boys that continually were with my son in detention, not given skills to make appropriate decisions.
Right. Well, panelists, folks, people watching live on replay, that's a wrap. We're going to ask each one of our friends to give final comments, also where they can be contacted, and then we're going to turn it over to Savam. But again, in tradition, ladies first. Christy, final comments, any calls to actions you have for anyone who's watching this live or on the replay. So we'll start with you.
Absolutely. Remember, from my standpoint, for the books for boys, especially young boys in literacy, please, 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 you're making sure you're offering them content that's appropriate to them, that they can relate to, is positive, shows males making positive role modeling, positive decision making. I think that's one thing, is normalize good men behavior around small boys.
And how can people get in contact with you?
They can get a hold of me on Facebook at The Adventures of Jane Gizmo, or on my website. You can message me there, www.janegizmo.ca.
Thank you so much for your valuable contributions and your continued hard work. Avram, next up.
Well, it's hard to summarize all the ground we covered. I don't think I'm up to that. I want to thank all the panelists and the people attending. I learned a lot from all of you. I did not mention, but I will now. I do have a new book out, which is related. It's called Hidden in Plain Sight: How Men's Fears of Women Shape Their Intimate Relationships. And you can reach me at changeconsultant.com. Or if you go on Facebook, there's a discussion group. If you in Facebook enter Men's Fears of Women, you'll find a discussion group for people talking about that topic.
Fantastic. Thank you. Pleasure to finally meet you. And I know we'll be having some more valuable conversations. Next up, let's go to Willie.
Okay. Willie A. Price Speaks. That's me. That's my website, Willie A. Price Speaks, Willie A. Price at AOL or Gmail, either one. But from boys to men, preparing young men for success. Working with right brain techniques is what we do with young people. And I think our young people, especially our boys, have to become more self-aware of who they are. And once they understand who they are, then you can work on the other things. If they don't understand who they are and understand themselves, they can never do much of anything in the public. And I find that working with young men, a lot of them don't understand who they are and where they want to go in life and what they want to do. But once you help them to start understanding those things, they start to surround themselves with better, which is what I heard Christy saying with her son. You know, they start to learn to surround themselves with better because they start to realize that some of the people around them right now aren't going the same place that they're trying to go. So that's what I just want to talk about, sharing my program. And if you're interested in finding out more about what we do and some of the techniques we use, please feel free to contact me at Willie A. Price at AOL or willieaprice@gmail.com. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oliver.
Yeah, mute. Wow, that's all I gotta say. Wow, wow, wow. This conversation is needed. And again, if you don't want me to give Siva more homework, then I'm gonna give you a little bit more homework, Dr. Vibe.
That's all right.
This need to continue so we can normalize these kind of conversation. And it's hard to wrap up everything, but I just want to wrap up everything by saying there's three things I want parents to, or educators or leaders in the community to really walk away with. And I call it the 3 C's. Connection. Connect with our loved ones. For parents, connect with your child. I'm talking about emotional connection. And then you can start correcting their misbehavior. It's much easier. And then when you do so, you're building characteristic skills, like positive characteristic skills. So, I mean, so when they're going in the real world, they're okay. You don't only have to pray and hope anymore. You're giving them, the basic to be able to be resilient, responsible adults. So I'll just like to leave that by saying that. And one more quick thing, Dr. Vibe, is I'm doing something a little bit different starting 22 moving forward. And when it comes to educating our parents, because that's where the core is. So, in March, there's a few, presentation that I'm going to give to shift parents' minds so they can see result in their child within 4 to 5 days. And, to learn more, you can find me on any platform, Mindful Parenting Toolkit, either .com or, it could be Twitter, it could be Instagram, wherever it is, you can find that. And I'm going to put in the chat as well how you can get on that wait list. So if you follow me on Instagram, you can click the link and you can get on that wait list, because there's a wait list for that. And I'm willing to provide that. Why? Because I am creating that village that David said it, trusted circle village. That's what I'm creating in order to be able to normalize these kind of conversation. That's why I wrap that up. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Love it. Thank you.
Excellent. Dave.
First of all, thank you very much to everyone for your wonderful insights and shared wisdom. It's been a insightful session, and really appreciate each of you. Dr. Vibe, great job coordinating and getting the flow going. And I want to congratulate Sivam and Voice of Men 360. And I'd like to also invite each of you back for different types of shows that Voice of Men 360 will be hosting over the next week, month, year.
Years.
We look to be a platform here to really support and encourage heartful conversations. I really enjoyed the opportunity to listen and to be listened to, and that's such a key component for men and women to collect and connect and to really express. A couple of ways to reach out would be on Continual Shift with Dave Rogers. I'd like to have a little side invite. If anyone has written a book and you'd like to be part of Meet the Author series, it's something I've been doing for about a year, and happy to help you with some of your marketing and promotion of your books, your messages, and ways to really resonate with your heart and soul. Please check out Loverin's Law. A big part of this community is constant and never-ending improvement and constant learning. And Loverin's Law is something that is introduced here in Ontario, and it is about educating about abuse. And I have a feeling that all of us can learn more, and as we've had an opportunity to do over the last couple of hours. So thank you, everyone. Dr. Vibe, great job, and wishing everybody an absolutely blessed February and beyond, as Dr. Vibe would say.
Okay, fantastic. I'll just close out quick. First thing, thank you to all, I don't like to call you panelists, friends. Thank you, friends, for making it an epic conversation. As much as possible, I like to go in safe embrace spaces and come out better. This is one of those times. So appreciate each one of you, all the success you've had in the past, you're going to be having and going forward. Appreciate that. Anyone who's watching out there, some few simple messages. First of all, remember to give yourselves grace. Very, very important. And also, don't manage your time, manage your energy. Very, very important. We have a lot of work to do, but you know what? It's hard work, not hard work. Savan, thank you for allowing me to be part of this epic conversation. And we want more. Yes, we want more. There needs to be more, because one of the things one of my mentors said a long time ago when I first met him, he said something that really struck me. And this is one of the reasons I do what I do, especially with men and boys. In the United States, and probably the same in Canada, 80% of the suicides that are committed by people over 40 are men. And believe it or not, it's the same thing with our teenagers. So we need to continue this. We need to have it and just keep on saving our men, saving our boys. And this is just a Dr. Vibe thing. The better our men and boys are, the better world we'll have. That's just me. You can push back on me if you want, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Savan, thank you again. You've got the closing thoughts. It's all on your lap now.
Thank you, Vibe. Thank you, Dr. Vibe. This is seriously a truly honor. Actually, when I was asking, can you host? I mean, I didn't really expect that. So it's a great honor. Thank you, Dr. Vibe, for accepting my request and hosting today's panel discussion. Thank you all the panelists, of course, friends, for joining and sharing your views actually. And one of the things maybe I want to add, you guys, that from as an immigrant, the cultural shock, we never touched on that, or there are a couple of areas that is still we need to touch and talk about that, because even in my 47, I'm 47, and even I can feel it still when I came about 16 or 17 years old. So I have been through a lot of struggles, challenges too. So many areas still we can cover. We need to discuss, we need to have an open conversation. Having said that, thank you all whoever watching this panel discussion is to recognize the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Men and Boys, which we observe on January 31st. This is our second year's observance. This year's theme is eradicating violence in the schools. Thank you, Dr. Jerome Tilak Singh, for appointing Voice of Men 360 as the Canadian coordinator for the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Men and Boys. Absolutely, we will take this opportunity very seriously, and whatever we can do, we will do it through our platform. And we do have a few announcements to share with you guys before I end up the show. Voice of Men 360 is running a special campaign, Self-Care for Indigenous Men, from December 22nd to January 31st. We are collecting gift cards, deodorants, razors, disposable razors, socks, and can towels. Call us at 416-356-7414 or 437-889-8329. info@voiceofmen360.org, or contact us through Facebook Messenger, and then we will let you know, and we can coordinate with you. And also, even if you prefer to send an e-transfer, please send it to info@voiceofmen360.org. And then we do have free few live shows open up, sharing their personal life journey. Live talk show is on Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And Willie, this is the Tamil live talk show, is on Sundays at 8 a.m. Eastern time. Monthly webinar, first Saturday of every month at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. We bring expertise organizations and discuss a particular topic each time. Monthly special show, The Unspoken Tears, second Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern time. The focus is on domestic violence against men, bullying, male sexual abuse, traumas, porn addictions, and human trafficking. South Asian Men Show, third Sunday of every month from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Voice of Men 360 and All Bengal Men's Forum will be hosting the show. We will specifically focus on the issues faced by South Asian men and create awareness. Each month, different countries will participate from South Asia. And author circle, we want to bring individuals who have been contributing to the well-being of men and boys through writings, articles, media, and recognize them, appreciate them. Third Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And we will, all our podcast, all of our shows are available on 6 platforms, including iPhone, Google Play, and so on. Monthly men's group meeting, only for men by men. Every 2 weeks on Tuesdays from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. through Zoom. And please join through Zoom. The link is available on our Facebook page and group. Pass the Talking Stick, Indigenous peer-to-peer support group. Fourth Friday of every month from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Please join through Zoom. There are no limitations with the gender, age, nationality, or ethnic groups. All walks of life can participate in any of our shows. If you want to be a guest on any of our shows or willing to be part of our organization and help us directly or indirectly, please reach out to us. We love to work with individuals, professionals, experts, community organizations, associations, corporations, government officials, and businesses. Phone number is 437-889-8329. Email address info@voiceomen360.org. Website www.voiceomen360.org. You can find us on all the social media. Facebook group page, join our group, Facebook group, so you can see our daily activities. Most of our activities are on Facebook group. Please invite your friends to join. And we are and also subscribe our YouTube channel, Voice of Men 360. Other social media platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, of course. And we want to reach out to more people, and we want to help more people. With that, just one humble request, whatever the discussion, whatever the messages that you have been hearing, please take it into thinking or your own consideration, whatever in your mind. But also, please share with others. So this way, it makes really sense to have more and more discussion and creating awareness. And also this way we can take to the next level or next step that we can make a difference in the community. Thank you all. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Be safe. Give yourselves grace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.